guys? Welcome to the Away Team. This is a podcast where we discuss current events, music, culture, from a counter-authoritarian point of view. With me, Caesar, looking forward to showing you a bunch of interesting perspectives on culture, life, conflict, protest, and many other things. And yeah, I think we're good to go.
Cool.
Let me make sure. Okay, yeah, all right. Yeah, so I just say, hey, so today we're here with Adamn Dewey. He's a protest photographer out there in Detroit, and he's been covering some really vital moments, I think, in those protests, exposing police brutality that I don't think otherwise would be documented. Adam, I just want to ask, how exactly did you get into photography? Just to start.
So I used to work for a nonprofit, and I was doing some work, like education conservation type work in Peru. Okay. The first time I went down, I just had an iPhone, and after seeing just like how just absolutely stunning the environment was, I realized that I should have long overdue owned a camera. And so I think about 6 or 7 years ago, I bought my first DSLR in hopes to kind of just learn the trade and everything, and just did a deep dive into it. It's probably become my first and foremost go-to hobby, I guess. I'm definitely not a professional yet, but definitely on the amateur level. I think I've always had an interest in documentary photography styles, though, because as a kid, I was obsessed with National Geographic, and
yeah, Nat Geo is pretty sick.
Oh yeah, and I definitely can tell that that's influenced my style, just from looking at my photos and how I've developed my own style, and then looking at some of these magazines I've kept over the years. And then, just studying up on conflict photojournalists like Lindsay Addario, Tim Hetherington, a lot of these famous people that go into combat zones and risk their life. Yeah. You kind of just, you get the vibe of what they're doing, and you kind of try to emulate it in some capacity, but with your own flair. Yes. And then so with everything that's been happening in Detroit, it was just this opportune moment, I guess, however unfortunate, obviously, but with the COVID layoffs, I've been out of a job since March. Sure. And so all of this kind of aligned in some weird way to give me the ability to document them almost every day. I think that in Detroit, they've had marches 43 days, and I've been out 36 or 37 of them. And it's created an interesting avenue, because being out there every day, the organizers and stuff got to recognize me, and I think building that relationship has allowed me to document things even better, because there's a relationship and a trust there.
Sure, trust is really important with photography like this.
Oh, definitely. If you don't have that, people are timid. If you're doing studio photography or whatever it is, if there isn't a trust and a comfort there, the photos just aren't going to turn out. So that's definitely helped a lot. Obviously with protest photography, a lot of it's just being on the being able to react on the fly too, because there's been a few moments where it's been vital to document, a cop car driving through the crowd.
Yeah, exactly.
The fights and stuff. Yeah. True. I think with partly Detroit's protests have been quite different than say Portland or Minneapolis or LA, where you've seen stuff being set on fire and whatnot. So Detroit's protests against police brutality, I think, are unique in regards that Detroit's a majority black city. It's 77 to 80% black.
I don't think most people know that. 80% black, that's, you don't really hear.
I believe it's the largest black population geared city, like to that level of percentage wise in the population in the United States. But so you have these protests in a city that's majority black.
Sorry, that's to interrupt you, but I'm kind of interested in a way, like how did I was gonna say our people, but how did like black people kind of get to Detroit in a way?
So the Detroit has like
some migration history, I guess.
So I mean, like Detroit was founded in 1701 by the French, and there's like this isn't totally common knowledge, but like there were slaves in Detroit in the early years by these settlers, which now there are statues and street names and stuff after these people, like Macomb, Livernois, John R. Williams. Like there's these people that have, I mean, it's just like, it's American history, right? So you have just like Confederate monuments, there's like these settler monuments that are kind of on the same playing field. So
people should try to take those down too, actually.
Yeah, and I mean, there's been some reaction to some of the statues. Like I remember, like there's been like bags put over a couple of their heads. Like no one's tried to tear one down, but the city did remove the Christopher Columbus monument, and with Detroit being on Anishinaabe land, like I would not be shocked if we see like a indigenous monument put up in its place, which I think would be very cool and respectful to the indigenous community. But fast forwarding a little bit, like in 1943, like when Detroit became like the arsenal of democracy, building tanks and planes and whatnot for World War II, the jobs just boomed up here. And so people from around the country started moving here for work, including a lot of Black Southerners. And with the housing pressure and obviously just like racism, there was the white flight kind of started to begin, where people were moving out into the suburbs. I believe the following year after that, some politicians lobbied to get highways placed to lead out of Detroit into the suburbs, which only aided that white flight.
Literally building roads out of the city.
Yeah.
Too many black people in it. That's kind of insane if you think about it.
Oh, definitely.
One thing I heard about too, just to like give people context of the type of city Detroit is, like the racial climate. And I want you to confirm or deny this. I heard that there was actually a wall or something, like built on like one part of the city. It's like between the black and white parts. Is that true?
Oh, I don't know anything about a wall in particular. I mean, I know like highways and stuff have bisected neighborhoods, and that's always been
True.
kind of like a racial dividing line implemented by politicians and city planners and whatnot.
I feel you.
But let me, getting back to the history just a little bit. The Detroit's always been pretty homogenized in this industry, just like the auto industry, you know. And when these jobs started leaving for the suburbs through like part of it was just like the modernization of the technology. Like they needed these assembly lines that needed very long stretches of land, and the city didn't have that, and so the suburbs did, and that was part of like these jobs leaving in the beginning. But then it only got exacerbated as things started going overseas and into the 90s with like the North American Free Trade Agreement. So you have like these jobs that are dwindling, which then puts a strain on the local economy as businesses leave, people leave, the tax base leaves, and crime rate goes up. There's less opportunities, schools are being defunded. All of these things are just these systemic issues that have caused many of the problems in Detroit, which now you have, I think the police department has a budget of $300 million, which is the largest out of all of their sectors. Jeez. And there's so many concerns and whatnot, and it's hard to really figure things out.
Sorry, but I think what's really important is the budget. I was actually going to ask, how has city council been responding, the police been responding to the protests? Like, I can't really call it unrest in Detroit because you guys have been pretty peaceful from what I can see.
Yeah.
But like, what's the response been like?
So I know early on, There were some meetings between lead organizers of Detroit Will Breathe, one of the main protest groups, and Mayor Mike Duggan and Chief Craig and some other political folks. And they had like some demands and whatnot that they were addressing, and I haven't seen much come out of it yet. There's been some delays on votes and whatnot due to pressures from the protests. Like, I think voting to extend Project Greenlight, which is like a video surveillance thing that's going on in the city, which obviously is kind of like 1984-esque.
Yeah, we're just talking about 1984.
Yeah.
Type shit.
And like there's been tons of studies showing how inaccurate this stuff is, because a lot of like it was mostly designed by white programmers, and they show like the inaccuracy of identifying people from other ethnicities, and how there's a lot of misidentifications, which then leads to police conflict with people that are 100% innocent. So there was a delay on that at least, but overall I think they're trying to skirt by. And one thing I worry is the protests, they constantly fluctuate. And the weekends obviously see more people, which adds more pressure. The weekdays shrink down to maybe like 100 or so. And not that that's necessarily small, but if you look at what's going across the country in some of these other cities where there's thousands out every single day, that adds a lot more pressure. And I think one of the problems Detroit faces is a lot of these Detroiters are essential workers. They haven't had any time off due to COVID. I think there's probably some potential fear of how the police will react. They don't want to be brutalized. They've seen the instances where things have happened on TV. But
so it all kind of like just compounds into a situation that just becomes like not worth the risk going out, even though they may be sympathetic to like I'm going to assume like most of them would be sympathetic to
like a lot of the more recent marches have been targeted into going through neighborhoods to show that, you know, we are here for them, and people come out of their houses in mass. They're chanting, you know, you see the fists of solidarity, you see kids jumping up and down. Sometimes people are joining in on the marches from then on. So there is definitely support within the community. I just think for whatever reason, people aren't able to march necessarily due to an array of reasons. But it's pretty awesome to see people from those communities end up joining the marches, and then you start to see new familiar faces day in and day out.
And one thing that I think should be, you know, all the people that are coming out into the street, you know, as you guys march along, and what are some of the concerns, like what are some issues that are unique to them, to Detroit specifically? Because I find like a lot of the cities have like their own unique ways that racism has affected them, right? And each city council's had like unique ways, I guess, in a way of like of doing that, like the suburb system in some cities. Some cities will use redlining, some won't. So it's like, I'm just kind of wondering if you have some insight on some of the strategies. Actually, you kind of went into it earlier, right? But I'm just wondering, like, if any of those things are being brought up in the protests, I guess,
Well, so the main core of the protest has like a list of demands. I think it's 24 demands in total, with like 11 priority demands. Let me find this real quick. So these are just a few of them. Defund and demilitarize the police. So obviously, with there being a huge police budget, demilitarizing them could be the first step into directing those funds into things that are underrepresented, like the public school system, where a lot of these systemic issues are rooted from. Because if there's a lack of education and opportunity, you're obviously going to see crime grow out of that. I had mentioned the Project Greenlight and facial recognition. That's something they want to end because it's a surveillance state. They want to drop all charges and citations received by protesters, which if you go back to the first weekend, for the most part, even when things got a little heated, overall, the protests were largely peaceful. And on, I think it was the first Tuesday, 120 something people were arrested, all nonviolent, all peaceful, for expressing their First Amendment rights. And they were all arrested solely for surpassing an 8 p.m. curfew.
It's ridiculous.
So that in itself is kind of crazy. They are trying to protect people from eviction orders, especially during a pandemic.
Okay.
This is something that I had no idea about until I began documenting the protests, but I think it's like 32 states have a protection for police officers to have consensual, quotes, sex with people in their custody.
What?
Which
is that qualified immunity or something different?
I'm not exactly sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if it somehow fits under that umbrella. But it's a very weird thing, because if you're under someone's custody, like how...
Yeah, like, why do you need permission to have sex with them? That's so weird. Like you
shouldn't be having sex with anyone while they're in your custody. Like,
it's unthinkable. It's like, why?
Yeah, and it's
why? That's
obviously a protection for police raping people. So it's a very weird thing.
That's insane. Literally, like, legalizes police rape.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't know that. Like, they're definitely not talking about that in, like, mainstream news outlets whatsoever, you know? Because, I mean, that would kind of blow, like, their whole point out of the water if you think about it.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Well, I feel like on some regards, the mainstream media is on, like, they essentially have always protected the status quo.
I think we actually haven't been I'm just learning how to use Zoom, bro.
Right on.
And I'm wondering, did we?
It says recording on my side.
Okay, good. Okay, just making sure. All right, never mind.
That would have been a shame.
I'll cut that out of the podcast. I was so scared. I'm like, no, I did not. This did not just happen. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, I see the red dot and it says recording.
Jeez, I was about to. All right, thank you. Sorry, never mind. Go ahead.
Okay. So kind of like backstepping a little, I think you were kind of asking about like some of the other tensions in the city. And
yeah, some of the issues unique to Detroit, I guess, in a way.
While they're the city is 80% black, the police force is about 55% black, which is good for a city that is majority black, but it could obviously be higher. Part of the problem, I think, with the police in terms of like how protesters view it is only 13% of them live in the city.
Oh, that is a big difference. So that means only 13% of them actually have to face the people that they police.
Exactly. And I think like any officers in any police force should live in their community, because you're going to know those people better. You're going to know the problems better. And you're going to just be closer connected. Like, you're not going to want to hurt someone, you know, or at least hopefully.
Exactly.
So
I mean, if you shoot somebody, if you have to go like, you know, an hour car ride to work or whatever, and, you know, you end up shooting somebody in that neighborhood, you know, you can unfortunately go back to your neighborhood and you won't be really reminded of it.
Yeah.
But like, you know, that's the whole psychological element of that too. If like you live in that neighborhood and then you get into an altercation and you wrongfully like hurt someone, well, the entire community, like your day-to-day life outside of your house is going to be affected by that. It enhances repercussions. You know, I think that's definitely something that's really, really important that isn't discussed either. Yeah.
I think another issue is, so there's been this revitalization of Detroit in regards of downtown and midtown areas by some of like Detroit's like billionaire class. Like the Dan Gilbert, who owns Quicken Loans and the Cleveland Cavaliers and whatnot. He's a Detroiter and has sunk a lot of money into the city and brought in like thousands of jobs to Quicken Loans, moving the headquarters there. the revitalization of certain areas with like the sporting arenas. But if you look at some of the issues pertaining to that, the jobs that those bring in are vastly not to city residents, they're to suburban residents that then commute in. And then also you have with the sporting arenas, at least, like significant portions of taxpayer dollars go into funding these like billionaire industries that sports are. So like I know Little Caesars Arena is the most recent one that was built like a couple years ago. And I think the project overall was like over 800 million to construct, and 300 of that came from taxpayer dollars. So and that could have been obviously funding better education or mental health issues. Like there's so many things, and obviously like the politicians are a part of that decision making, and that in itself is also one of the things protesters are marching against.
Exactly. I guess it's yeah, exactly what their tax dollars are used for. They would rather, during a health, like, during a pandemic, you probably want more money going to your health sector or whatever, not to like,
Well, I actually just saw this on an article the other day that if you look at Detroit city funding, Rashida Tlaib, actually, this is who I got it from. You might know who she is because she's one of the famous like squad representatives, and I think so Detroit's police department gets like 300 million, and the health department usually uses around like 9 million, which that's a big disparity during a pandemic in a city that was disproportionately affected by this with a large black population. It's very suspect. And I mean, people
it's corrupt. It's so skewed. It's like, it's not even like it's 200 million and then 100 million, or there's no like,
it's a huge disparity,
and it's just weird. It's like, damn, how much. It also makes you think too, because like, how well do hospitals in like Detroit operate? I'm going to assume they're like relatively clean and.
Oh yeah, I think most of the hospitals are good from everything I've heard. Like I've known some people that worked in there. And
exactly. So think about it. If $9 million gets them by enough to do well, to the point where it beats like the average daily standard, what the hell is $300 million doing?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For the police, like.
Well, that's like stuff that I was texting to you earlier with like, we have this militarization of
or something. Like, what are they doing?
Sorry.
I made a joke. I'm like, are they buying like Apache helicopters?
Oh, yeah.
What are they doing? Like, that's a lot of.
Well, they definitely have helicopters because I see those flying over the marches every single day. But just like I had texted you earlier today,
true.
There's these Stingray devices that interfere with like cell phones, track your location, interfere. The protesters will do live streams, and those have been getting interfered with by these Stingray devices. They have this riot gear that costs like, I don't know, like roughly like $600 to like $900 for like the entire equipment setup per individual. They have like these LRAD devices, I think it's long range acoustic devices that make you feel like you're losing your hearings to make you disperse. So all this like equipment that in theory rarely gets used is costing probably exorbitant costs. And I don't know if they necessarily need that, because if you go back before September 11th, most police forces didn't have this equipment. And this was something about like a spillover effect of like the military industrialized complex, where
you're
selling this stuff to local police departments, not just the military.
Yeah, a good point, because I was going to say, like, pretty much it seems like a defunct military, because like the military industrial complex is one of the main industries in America right now, right? So I mean, if there's not enough wars to fight, then you need to use that equipment somewhere. And if there's unrest at home, they're fighting a drug war and all that stuff, then might as well, I guess. But it's just kind of insane that the police is using $300 million to buy like James Bond equipment, pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily all going to that, because there is like, I mean, they have over 2,000 officers, so like obviously just keeping them employed costs a significant portion. It's the standard operation budget. And it is important to note that I think if you go back to 2000, there used to be about 5,000 officers employed by the city, and now there's only about 2,000. So that's a dramatic decrease.
True.
There's reason for concern for that. Like, any city has crime, right? And there recently has been like a big uptick in, I think it was homicides have climbed like 20-something%, which is a huge jump.
Jeez.
And so police are vital to violent crime. And there is, like, I'm not anti-police by any means, as an individual. I don't want to speak for anyone else, but like, I see the importance that they have, and I think it's important to recognize that, and especially in the city where the majority of the police department is Black. Even though that many of them don't live inside the city, they still are in some capacity representing the populace that they protect. And like, I've been really curious. Like, I want to go up to some of these officers and ask what, like, as a Black officer, this movement is both for you and against you. Like, what is your perspective on it? Because I think it'd be fascinating. I mean, you could even do a podcast on that. It would be fascinating to see some of these Black officers, because they're
definitely, there's some duality there.
Oh, yeah. Like, their lives have been impacted, obviously, by the color of their skin. They likely joined the police force to create change from within, which is a great thing. But then they're in this systemic system of just potentially corrupt leaders and things that are like a massive uphill battle to change. So I'm not a political scientist, so I don't have the answers, but yeah, it's definitely a complex thing.
No, for sure. It's definitely, and it's a good point to bring up. Like how does a Black officer feel, watching those protests? Like, do they, that's something that needs to be asked. Yeah. I'm trying to think. I think also, I'm glad that you also brought those things up, like Detroit having a majority, 55 is a majority, Black police force. Like, does that most of those police officers live in the suburbs, so that kind of like denotes like a class difference as well. And I think that, funny enough, when I asked like what's unique to Detroit, I think that's pretty unique to Detroit, because most cities, like even cities like, let's say Ferguson, which was 70% Black, most of the officers, they had like barely any white police officers. I think they had like 2 or 5 or something, but like it was in the single digits. And I find that, like, city council looks similar and everything, but I think also maybe that also kind of maybe impacted the reason why those protests in Detroit maybe stayed peaceful, because most of the violent protests have been incited by the police, like in Montreal here in Canada. Yeah, I definitely
think that's part of it.
Tear gas, people went crazy. NYPD starts like ramming people with cars and doing stuff. People go crazy. Yep. No, that did happen in Detroit, and I don't think people reacted the same way. But it's because like that violence was not normal. It's not like every day, every hour, you're seeing somebody get beat or arrested for no reason. So there's not that same type of anger or mistrust, I would guess. I mean,
Detroit definitely has like a past with certain police brutality issues, like the '67 riots, the Algiers motel.
On that, that's really important to civil.
Reminded me of that. The 1967 riots stemmed from a police raid on a bar, and the city reacted, and then there were, I think it was 9 individuals in the Algiers motel just kind of drinking, having a good time, and someone had a starter pistol, like a toy gun, and fired it, and police reacted by firing upon the motel, raiding it, abusing these 9 individuals, and ended up murdering 3 teenage Black men.
Jeez.
And so if anyone's interested in it, obviously you can read up about it online. You may have seen the movie Detroit. That's centering around that incident. It's pretty hard to watch, but it's good to be aware of these things. So that was like one major incident with Detroit police brutality. Obviously, there's lots of instances. Malice Green in 1992, I think, was another one where police, ununiformed police in an unmarked car tried to stop Malice, who stopped at I think it was a drug house. And when he refused to put down, I think, a bag of something that he had, he was beaten over the head 14 times with a mag-light flashlight and died of brain trauma. And I believe those two officers that were involved in that incident did see charges and faced prison time, whereas the cops in 1967 saw nothing.
That's insane. And like, if you think about it, that's progress. It's like, oh, at least they got charged now.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, that's wild, man. I don't even know what to say about that.
But like, kind of going back to what you were saying about like the way race and the police kind of may have impacted the protests, I definitely think with there being a majority black force, the city being majority black, that's protected the city from kind of this anarchism. Whereas like the first few nights when I went out, I saw protesters protecting property, protecting each other, protecting even the police. Because I know on that Saturday night was the first time I ever experienced tear gas. We were marching through the city. You know, I'm getting all these crazy photos and whatnot. And then they eventually faced the police at 3rd and Michigan, which is kind of like the headquarters for the police there in the city. And at first, like, there's conversation trying to go on. The police obviously aren't going to entertain that. They're just standing there. And some instigators throw like a beer bottle or something, a pop bottle. And you see a lot of protesters like, please don't do that. Like that you're playing into their hands to create this narrative that we are violent agitators and we don't want that. We just want to be here to represent the city the right way. And then eventually like a few other people maybe throw some more things. I know at some point, like when I saw the riot police coming up, I backed away a little bit. Yeah. And then all of a sudden there was like this huge surge forward where the police grab some people, protesters back up, someone throws like a firecracker and it explodes right behind the cops, and then you start to see tear gas and rubber bullets coming out. And then later on, when they kind of dispersed the protesters back, they were marching through the downtown area, and some protesters tried to grab some trash cans to like break a window into the Nike store. But I applaud all the other protesters that responded immediately. People lined the windows and got into like the guy's face that were like, you don't want to do this because you're playing into that narrative once again. I'm not going to destroy my city.
The peace police narrative.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was great to see the protesters holding each other accountable and protecting the city and even the officers. One gentleman I saw that was trying to protect the officers from being thrown, from having like objects thrown at them. He later was standing in front of me when I was getting a photo, and I could see something like flying towards us in the air. And so I pulled the camera away from my face, and this tear gas canister slams into his leg. Excuse me. And he's in some pain. Sorry.
Is he okay? Like, that sounds like that would hurt.
So he was in so much pain he couldn't walk, and then he's trying to, I think he was just trying, like he probably had his little bit of adrenaline, and he's like, oh, I'm fine. Yeah, but I'm like, I told him, like, dude, you obviously can't put weight on this. You need to, let's pull up your pants, see what it looks like. And he pulls it up, and it's just like a fountain of blood pouring out. And I've never seen someone's bone sticking through their leg. And it wasn't broken or anything, but it was like the wound was so deep that I saw his shin.
Shit.
And so we called medics and everything. They're washing it out, and he, like, the second he saw that, like, he went white and kind of got like, it looked like he got woozy a little bit. So we had him sit down and get the medics over there and whatnot and treat him. So I assume he definitely went to the hospital for stitches at least that night. But there were some other injuries, people getting hit in the head with rubber bullets and whatnot. I know one
This is totally different from, basically, I was completely wrong about it being mainly peaceful or that.
So
kind of not.
That's
the only difference that you're kind of proposing, though, is that apparently this time, for the first time that I've seen, protesters more instigated the violence, as in they threw the first shot.
So the first weekend, I would say Friday, Saturday, Sunday, there was some violence going on. Mm-hmm. Saturday, there definitely were probably maybe a handful of instigators that really set all of this off. I would say about 98 to 99% of the protesters were peaceful, and that small fraction is what cued a reaction by the police and created all of this kind of madness, which then each time there's an event like this, you see repercussions the following day or days. So Sunday, there was a large crowd that met outside the police department, and they were asking police to kneel with them. The police kneel. The 8 p.m. curfew comes up, and then the cops start gassing people again and hitting them with batons and stuff. And so you get these reactions each time, and then Monday sees a larger crowd, which was 100% peaceful, but it was really surreal seeing this Monday protest, largely organized by a high schooler who was 16, leading this march towards the police department. And when they get there, they're met by an army. You see hundreds of cops in riot gear, the 2 tanks sitting out, mounted police, all of this stuff. Everyone.
That's where all their school money went, pretty much.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Then Tuesday, there was the big issue, I think I had already mentioned, where a bunch of people were arrested for nonviolent expression of their First Amendment rights, right to free speech, and right to assembly. And so each time, these things kind of drove more to the cause, and I think the police just weren't aware of how the way they respond is going to change the perspective of the protesters, because the demands definitely changed from we want police accountability to we want to demilitarize the police because you brutalized us for our constitutional rights. So there's this ever-changing thing that's kind of going on, I guess. You did say you wanted to talk about the technical side of photography in it, so I can mention that.
So what exactly do you think is the best camera setup to photograph photography, and maybe the best ISO shutter settings, things like that? I'm gonna guess it's stuff for high movement. It's also a higher shutter speed and stuff like that. But
I think every photographer might have a different answer because there's so many options now. Crop sensor, full frame, mirrorless. There's so many options out there. Some people maybe just focus on video, which I think is very important in these protests, because a photograph, while they're obviously dynamic in their own right, the video shows. This whole movement started by a video, right? With George Floyd. Obviously focus on whatever your own interest is. But for me, when I first started photographing the protests, I had my entry-level camera that I've had for years. And definitely there were some constraints, and I've learned how to deal with those constraints pretty well. But talking to some of the photojournalists I would see out there, and they always have 2 cameras. And I think one thing that's important is to maybe have a prime lens, because those shoot pretty fast. You don't have to worry about, because they're locked into their focal length, so you can shoot things fast. Obviously, your lens is you have to get close to things, so you're putting yourself in danger with that. But then in the same regards, they always have another camera, usually with a telephoto zoom lens, so you can kind of document safely from a distance. Obviously, focusing in the dark becomes a little more of a challenge, and that was something I was dealing with because of my older camera. The ISO settings just weren't the greatest for it. So recently I upgraded to a Nikon D500, which is a pretty fast reacting camera, and it's the first one I've ever had that has a auto ISO settings, as well as a minimum and maximum shutter speed to prevent motion blur. And so the computer in it's highly intelligent, and so it just made photographing things in motion so much easier. And like I absolutely love it. And it's one of those like pro tier cameras, but it's also a crop sensor. Like the reason I went with it was just so I could use all of the lenses I already have, because obviously if you're using like full frame cameras, which are definitely like top of the line, the glass or the lenses, they are expensive as hell. So like if you're looking for like let's say a 35 millimeter prime lens for a crop sensor, maybe like $100 to $200. For a full frame, you might be spending like $500. So there's this, that's definitely something like after having a rubber bullet like fly over my head by a foot, and like my camera was the one thing protecting me. Like
if you hit me, just off the camera, bro. Shit, I feel
yeah, like it's sad when you're willing to sacrifice yourself instead of your camera. But yeah, so I would honestly just say like whatever you're comfortable with, roll with, but you definitely got to be mindful, because a lot of these protests, like the big events, are happening at night, so low light settings are crucial. But I know there's like a lot of people that I've seen like have taken amazing stuff with even just iPhones. So like if you're a skilled photographer, you're a skilled photographer, and I don't know if cameras necessarily are the most vital part of that. Like they do obviously play into things, but having the trained eye and whatnot is a big part of that skill set. So
definitely. That's definitely thank you very much for sharing that, because I think I don't see these protests going anywhere anytime soon. You know, we're at day 40 you're saying. And I think it's definitely important for anyone who maybe wants to go and document, who's like, this is more geared to people who are already photographers, already have these types of cameras. Kind of like what may help you take, like, you know, a better photo, an award-winning photo like Mr. Dewey here on the newspaper and stuff. Actually, you know, I want to ask you about that too. What happened to the guy that got hit by the police cruiser that you the photo you took? Is he okay?
I think he had some like bone bruising and like sprains in his like knee and ankle. But yeah, that was a wild, like, that whole day was like beautiful, because it was like 29 organizations coming together and marching with one another throughout Southwest Detroit, cool. Chanting in multiple languages, because there's a large Mexican American community there. And to get back to the cars where everyone kind of started, they had to go down this road, and for whatever reason, like, the police said that they blockaded it because of concern for traffic, but when you look down, you couldn't see any traffic, and the police were already blockading the road. Like so it was very.
So that's definitely sus.
But so the crowd just starts. Sorry. Yeah, like it seems like it's an instigatory act. But again, I mean, I don't have all the details. But so the crowd initially moves through peacefully around the car. There was obviously like some chants and like fuck 12, this and that. People were giving the fingers to the cops and to the vehicles. And I think it's like a standard cop procedure where they kind of like start nudging through the crowd, which at this point I think was completely unnecessary, because the crowd was moving through. And so one of the organizers gets bumped in the back, and the cop kind of keeps lurching forward a little bit at a time, and maybe gave it too much gas at one point. The entire crowd screams because it seems like they're going to get run over. And someone in the back, obviously you can't see what's going on, and they're going to react out of like an adrenal dump. Sorry, I'm like, my academic background is all biology, so I always like relate things to biology. And so I'm like, if you think of someone in the back, you are marching with your companions, you hear the crowd scream, you're going to react. And the police tried to say that there was hammers and rocks in the crowd, which there 100% not. But there were like skateboards and bikes and stuff. So I think someone reacted and hit the back of the window out of instinct, trying to protect their group, which then the cop gets this adrenal dump, freaks out, and really starts to rev it, pushing into the crowd. Some of the protesters are forced onto the hood because it's either, some people can get to the side, other people can't. So it's either go under or go over, which I would choose going over. And at one point, the cop gets them off the hood, but they have like a second to react, and then he floors it. He gets up to maybe 20 to 30 miles an hour, and they're on the hood. And one rolls off the passenger side, and then the other, who I took the photograph of, had to jump off the hood. And when he landed, he like tweaked his knee and ankle pretty bad. Luckily, like I'm shocked that no one was hurt, because
really
like everyone sprinted to them.
It was like GTA type shit. So
there was like 3 people that. Oh yeah, it's wild. And so that it obviously spurred more reaction. Like the following day was a Monday, and the march was huge, and I think it was in relation to that event. But so like, this is something else for like photographers. If you are there and you document something and you see actual like professional photojournalists, like reach out to them. Like that's what I did. I saw someone with a press pass, and I was like, I just got a photo of this event. Like, do you want it? Like, how can I help get it out there? And she gave me her card, and I contacted her later that night, and they ended up putting in the Detroit Free Press, and then eventually the USA Today, because I think the Free Press is partnered with them.
That's very important too. Just talk to
them. I mean, I think it's very important to document these things in general, because it's good to document the good and bad, because one, this is history, but also for accountability for everyone. Because like, what if those individuals were severely injured? Like what would have happened out of that?
Exactly. And then if it wasn't documented, it would have been like dubious. They, maybe somebody tries to take that claim to court or whatever, they'd be like, well, who saw it? But with a picture on the cover of USA Today, it's like they can't really deny that, and that's the important part. And for sure. Geez. Well, I'm glad to hear the guy was okay, because that was wild. I thought nah, he at least broke a bone or something, because I think that's about it, man. I'd like to thank you for coming on, and appreciate being, appreciate your perspective, your expertise. I don't think there's anything else really to say. Do you have anything that you might want to plug in, like, Instagram, anything you're up to right now?
I mean, if you want to follow my Instagram, it's Adja Dewey, ADJADEWEY. But one other thing I would like to point out is definitely support Black photographers in this movement, because this movement is about them and their humanity. And the perspective that they are going to have in this comes from life experience in this type of chaotic world that we are now marching to change. So I think if you see someone that is documenting this stuff and is Black, it's vital to support them, whether it's just a simple follow or even purchasing some prints or whatnot. But if I can just give a shout out to some of the people I've been marching with, like there's at Birdseye, BURDSEI. Brianna's a great photographer. She's been out there in Detroit with me. Ray at Trilogy Beats 313 is another great photographer. And I know there's a guy I think he's in New York City, and he reached out to me at one point, and he's done some fantastic work, and I think he's planning on doing a photo book. It's E. Mackey Creates, and he has a video he put out, and I think it's very important for any photographer to know this, that like if you want to get into photojournalism, like the biggest thing is to just do it. Like you have to put in the work, and if you have money saved up, like, and something's happening, say in another city, like like I could have easily flown to Minneapolis to document things there, right? If I had money saved up. Going there and doing it is what's really going to set you apart from some other people. And that's what this guy has done. He's gone around the US to document some of these protests. So he's super experienced and has some amazing work under his belt.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point too, is a lot of people don't understand like the way to do, I think almost any craft is just to go and just do it. You know, school will help and will help you do it better.
Yeah,
but it's not a prerequisite to have a career. Actually, I think almost any industry besides like, you know, being a doctor or a lawyer or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, practice makes perfect, man. Especially in photography, it's just the more you do it, the better you're going to get. And like each type of photography is different, so the more you're pushing yourself, like they're going to impact the different types of photography that you work in. So like if you're really good at portraiture and you start diving into maybe protest or conflict photography, it's going to influence and like how your product turns out, and it could add for some unique creative outlets.
Yeah, man, thank you.
I appreciate it.
I'm not sure what else to say. All power to the people, no justice, no peace.
All power to the people.
Fuck 12. I think you would say more like frick 12 or or fudge 12, but I feel you. Yeah, man, I don't know. Thank you for coming on, and definitely really thank you for sharing the Black photographers as well, so that we can support the brothers and get like some good like firsthand footage and everything as well. Yeah, man. Thanks.
Right on, man. All right, appreciate it all.
The background music was by Louis Astro. He's a Detroit resident himself. He is Lewis, Astro, ASTRO on Instagram. Definitely check him out. He has a lot of his beats and graphics up there. Check him out, man. He's really good. Good Black producer in the city, bro. Check him out.